Hello, this is Hamza again from GamingOnLinux.com, and today I'm taking a look at Pyre, the latest game from Supergiant Games. So Pyre is a party-based RPG, though that doesn't necessarily describe it too well, because this isn't really the kind of party-based RPG you might be used to. Pyre tells the story of an exile, that is you, who gets sent into the world of Downside, which is sort of like a purgatory where criminals and heretics are sent to sort of serve for their crimes. It's sort of like an eternal damnation of sorts. And you are quickly found by another group of exiles who form the Nightwings, a team of people who are on a quest to regain their freedom, which can be gained by going through these rites. Basically, they are a ritualistic game where the winners get a chance of getting back home. So, the gameplay itself of Pyre is roughly divided into two sections. There are the rites, and then there's the journey between these rites. And the rites are sort of like the combat system of the game, but it isn't really accurate. Rather, the rites are a form of sport, where there are two teams consisting of 3 players, and the goal is to grab the orb in the middle and carry that to the enemy's pyre to damage it, while also protecting your own pyre. And once the pyre reaches 0 health, you basically win. Or alternatively, if your pyre reaches 0 health, then the other team wins. The catch here sort of is that only one character in your team can move at a time. And all the characters that are, basically all the characters apart from the one that is carrying the orb have this kind of an aura around them. And that is basically your sort of a defensive weapon. It is used to block players, and if another player enters the aura of an opposing teammate, they will be banished, and essentially what they, like, it's kind of like they die and then they respawn a little bit later, but they don't really die. You can also cast this aura in front of you, depending on the character, of course, because the characters are different, but it is basically like a ranged attack. And like I mentioned, the different characters have like different stats, and they also have a different method of casting their aura. So in some circumstances the aura might be just a beam that you cast in front of you. In some circumstances it might be a wider cone that you cast. And some people just, instead of casting an aura, they sort of dash forward with their aura. And that kinda allows you to attack opponents. Of course, this is an ability that is only limited to the characters that are not carrying the orb. And if you are carrying the orb and you switch to another character, then that character also gets the orb. So basically, if you're currently carrying the orb, you cannot really attack. Though the players that are currently standing still, they do have their defensive aura, so you can sort of block people that way, but you cannot attack directly against the hostiles. And your sort of aim is to then try to either kill off or banish the opponents, and that way making the way clear for you to carry the orb to the pyre, or alternatively you can try to sort of maneuver around the enemies and get to the pyre that way. And because these different characters behave in different ways, some of them are kind of slow, but they have massive auras or very powerful abilities to cast their auras. Those characters are not necessarily so suited for a direct attack, but they are good at defensive roles, so they can keep your pyre safe. And then you have these quicker characters that can be very good at maneuvering around people, and that way they can douse the flames of the enemy pyre. But usually these quicker characters also do less damage against the enemy pyre, so if you can get one of those lower characters up all the way to the enemy pyre, it's possible that you can douse the pyre with fewer attacks, so you can do it faster that way. And this kind of a system allows you to create varying strategies and team compositions depending on your playstyle. So you might be a person that likes to go head on with the enemy and like use your auras to destroy or banish the enemies. And then move in with one of your slower characters carrying the orb, and then do a massive amount of damage to the Pyre. Or you might be like me, and you basically use your characters as sort of like static blocks. So you block off areas, and then you, when the situation allows, you switch to a quick character, grab the orb, and then just scoot around the enemies, and that way you go to the Pyre and then do damage that way. I personally liked that approach a lot more, though I have had to, in some circumstances, adjust my strategies and sometimes go a little bit on the defensive instead. So that's pretty much how the rights work. The other part of the gameplay that I mentioned is the journey between these rights. So, between the rights, you basically move around on this wagon, and on this journey you need to pick between various kinds of paths. The game sort of offers you different routes to take, and sometimes these varying party members that you have gathered along the way, they might recommend certain paths over others, and usually there is some kind of a reason to pick one of these paths. Some of them may have like valuables, treasures, things like that, but others may be possibly safer or quicker. So it's sort of like a risk-reward type of thing, and sometimes it is simply a matter of, do you want basically just pure valuables that you can sell off later, or do you maybe want an item that is maybe not the item that you want, because there are these things called talismans that basically allow you to boost certain stats of your party members during these rights. So you might want to go directly for one of those talismans, or you might go for some of those valuables instead that you can then say, like you can later on sell them and then buy another talisman, for example. And these also, another thing that you can do during the journey is that you can run into these various characters and they will join forces with you. This is pretty much a thing like, you don't just randomly run into characters and, you know, get just some random character. It seems that the game has pretty much determined what order you're going to get these characters in, and it doesn't really seem like you can really say no to a character. So once you run into a character that wants to join your party, you pretty much have to accept them. However, you can be a little bit like, you can say that you don't necessarily trust them, but it doesn't seem like they are like discouraged from really joining the party regardless. You can also have various discussions with your party members during the journey, so you can, you know, you can go into the wagon and just have a talk with some of the guys from your party to sort of learn about their backgrounds, their personalities, what they think about what is currently going on, and you also have these interesting interactions between the characters. Some of the characters like one another, some of the characters really hate each other, and that also plays into the rights in some ways as well. So in some circumstances, for example, if you have a certain, even an opponent character, you might find that some of your party members don't necessarily want to fight, or they will definitely want to fight. And sometimes even if you play a certain character in your team, it might be that another party member doesn't want to play that time. Sometimes party members also seem to get sick, or they have some other obstacles that force them out of the games for a while. Like, it's a temporary thing, but it sort of encourages you to change your team composition every now and then, so that you don't just default to the same people all the time. It also makes, like, there is this system called inspiration that sort of also encourages you to vary your team a little bit, because if you leave some of your teammates out of the rights temporarily, let them sort of sit them out, they will gain inspiration. I think if you win, I'm not entirely sure, but it could be that they gain inspiration no matter what. But if they have inspiration, it means that they level up faster when they actually get to play. So it's a good idea to sort of balance when you have various kinds of your party members playing, so that you can get the maximum leveling up possible. Also, during the journey, you sometimes have the option to train your skills, the skills of your party members, or scavenge for valuables every now and then. And like I mentioned, these valuables are pretty much used to sell off to a merchant, and then you can, from that same merchant, buy items that allow you to get buffs for your characters. For example, make them faster, make the auras that they have bigger, things like that. And now that I've pretty much covered the gameplay as well as I can, let's talk a little bit about the art side of things. So just like with Supergiant's previous games, Bastion and Transistor, Pyre continues with the traditional style of hand-drawn graphics, and they are definitely very nice to look at. I think the art style here is it's very high it's very consistent and very high quality, just like in Bastion and Transistor. And well, one thing I would like to point out is that the landscapes and environments, they are fairly abstract. They don't really matter too much because like they are only part of the sort of journey part of the game, so it doesn't really matter too much. But I personally sort of prefer the slightly more realistic environments of Bastion and Transistor, but I don't really have much to complain about, honestly. And the like I mentioned, the art style, it works, it's very high quality, it looks very nice. And the graphics never really get into the get in the way of the gameplay, and the animations and the art work very well with the gameplay. So I don't really have anything to complain about in the art department, and in my opinion, overall the game looks very nice. And another part of the art is most definitely the soundtrack, which is worth mentioning. Just like with Bastion and Transistor, it's made by Darren Korb. So, as you might expect, if you've listened to the Bastion and Transistor soundtracks, it is nice to listen to. It's I'm even like after having listened to it a couple of times now. I haven't listened to the full soundtrack, but I have listened to the first parts of the soundtrack while I've played the game, and also while I have just been writing the articles and whatnot. I think it might very well be the best soundtrack out of the 3 Supergiant games thus far. You can sort of recognize the style if you've played Transistor or Bastion or listened to their soundtracks, but it's not too similar, and it definitely works well with the art on display as well. So in my opinion, it does relay the sensations, and you know, it gives a nice ambience to the environments that and circumstances you go through in the game. So now that the art is out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the technical side. So the game requires, hardware-wise, a dual-core at 3.0 GHz, 4 GB of RAM, and an OpenGL 4.2 Plus capable GPU. And on my R7 1700 plus R7 370 rig, so my main gaming rig, I can report that the game performs without any particular problems. The game performs overall well. It's capped, I think, by VSync at like 60 FPS, and that works really well with the game. However, the launch for this game wasn't really problem-free. Initially, the game had some annoying bugs that basically caused the game to outright crash when you tried to launch it. But by now, the problems have been ironed out, so at the moment I am recording this, the game is definitely stable and seems to be in a bug-free state. I've played it for about 8 hours, and I haven't seen any kind of a crash or a bug during all of that time. So I think the game is more or less stable. I also very briefly tried it on my laptop, just to see what happens on sort of the minimum spec side of things. My laptop, just so you know, is an A10 9600P APU-based laptop, and it is definitely very close to the minimum specs required. It is a quad-core machine, but the requirement states a dual-core 3.0 GHz machine is required, and although the APU does advertise 3.3 GHz boost, I have yet to see it do that, so it's pretty much stuck at 2.4 GHz, as far as I know. and the performance seems pretty playable, although I would like to stress the point that I didn't actually do quite that extensive testing. I basically just loaded up a couple of areas and loaded up the rights, the practice mode to the rights, and it doesn't really hold the 60 FPS mark at 1080p, and sometimes in the journey map it dropped down to below 30 FPS. However, the journey map mode thing doesn't really require a whole lot of FPS to be usable, and when I switched the resolution down to 720p, it was definitely a lot closer to 60 FPS. However, even at 720p, the rights don't seem to run at like they are not quite up to 60 FPS, so I would recommend maybe something a little bit faster than an APU like this to play the game. However, it would at least seem to be playable on an APU like this. Also, a thing worth noting is that there aren't a whole lot of graphics options available in the game, so you cannot really turn down any kind of a setting apart from the resolution. So that kind of limits your options as to how much you can actually tweak the game to make it run on slower machines. So I would pretty much recommend something a little bit faster than this laptop APU. Like I would like to point out once again that it is an A10 9600P, so it's not a particularly powerful APU, but something a little bit faster than that should do it. And if you are running on a system of that kind of speed, then if you turn the game down to 720p, it does seem to be mostly playable. So, in conclusion, Pyre is definitely an enjoyable game. It definitely, I think, says something that I've put about 8 hours into it so far, and I only got it at launch, so I've only played it for like a couple of days here. And it also seems to be fairly long compared to Supergiant's previous titles. Transistor, for example, was, I think, only about 4 to 5 hours long, unless you made it difficult for yourself on purpose. And I have played it for 8 hours, and I'm expecting at least a couple hours more. I'm not 100% sure how long the game is going to be, and I haven't made it to the end of the game quite yet. But I am still, like, it feels that I am not quite at the end yet. Also, since the game has various kinds of forking paths, and you can make various kinds of different decisions, it would seem that there is also some replayability on top of that, so I think you are getting a fairly decent amount of hours out of this game. The graphics and music definitely up to par with previous Supergiant games, and possibly even exceeds their previous work. At least the animation seemed a lot better than previous Supergiant games. So I would say that it is definitely a game that looks and sounds very, very nice, and I would highly recommend that if you're going to pick up the game, do also pick up the soundtrack, because you're probably going to like it, particularly if you liked the soundtracks of Bastion and Transistor. The soundtrack here is, I think, I'm not 100% sure, and I'm most definitely not a music critic, but I would at the moment say that the soundtrack is better than that of Bastion and Transistor. It is a little bit different, of course, so, you know, there's that. It's completely and entirely subjective, but that's what I think at the moment. So, in my opinion, the real question here is whether you like the way the rights work. It's definitely very unique, and I do think that it's very commendable that Supergiant has decided to go for another kind of a unique combat system, if it can be called that. It's not really a combat system, it's more like a sports system. And it does offer plenty of depth and strategy, but I imagine it's probably not for everybody. And the fact that the game sort of calls itself a party-based RPG, not really sure if that's how I would describe the game. It does have a party, it does have some RPG elements, but it is completely unlike any other party-based RPG I've ever heard of or played. So there's definitely that. And the characters And the story, the characters seem quite nice. I like the fact that the characters have a lot of interaction with one another. And the story also seems pretty good. I'm not like sure it's the it's pretty much not the best story I've seen in a video game, but it does hold my interest quite well, and I am most definitely still curious after 8 hours to see how it actually ends. So there is that. So that has pretty much been my thoughts on Pyre. It costs €20, $20, or £15, or whatever your regional equivalent will be. And overall, I would say that it is worth at least checking out. I would probably look into the videos about the rights, the main gameplay, and then make that decision, because I think that's pretty much where it's going to divide some people. Some people are probably not going to like the way the rights work. Some people will probably really like the way the rights work. So it kind of depends on how you think about that. But like, if you ask me what I think, and if you ask me if it's worth picking this game up, then I would say yes. I have enjoyed it thus far, and I'm still enjoying it, and I intend to play through all the way. And I did, in fact, buy this copy myself. I wasn't sent a copy or anything like that. We didn't get any kind of pre-release copies or anything, so I decided to pick it up for myself, and I am very happy with that purchase, so there is that. Anyway, hopefully you have enjoyed this video and gotten something out of it, and I will see you guys in future videos and live streams, so see you guys then.